My name is Jessie, and I just finished my first year at Harvard University. I lead one of CollegePass's series, which is about applying to Harvard. What I think, they look for in their candidates, some of my experiences, and just various components about life at Harvard, whether that be academics, extracurriculars, or just answering any questions at all that crop up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm Isha, and I'm a lead advisor at CollegePass. I particularly specialize in Canadian undergrad admissions. And today we're going to be looking at what it takes to really apply to some of the top schools in Canada. So we're going to look at, 3-4 colleges in particular that are super popular and very prestigious. And then I'm going to essentially be taking you through the various application requirements. So let's get started. Also, throughout the duration of this session, if you have any questions, please type them out in the Q&A, and I would be happy to address them towards the end. Okay, so let's get started. Why study in Canada? I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of students who often, want to know about why is it that, Canada is such a popular destination for students across the globe. Now, Canadian colleges and universities are known for their academic excellence. They have a great reputation in terms of the academic standards that they've managed to set. They've also managed to set themselves apart in terms of a global worldwide standing, with Canadian schools ranking very high and at the top of the list. Multicultural diversity, I think the international student intake in Canadian schools at large is great. It's at par with the UK and the US. So as an international student, you're exposed to so very much, which is great. Another very, very interesting aspect about Canadian colleges and universities is the co-op program that they offer, which was in fact, we're going to be talking about this a little later when we touch upon the University of Waterloo. But again, a very interesting added bonus that makes Canada even more appealing. There's a lot of focus on research, and there are varied opportunities that is available to a student in terms of research. Canada is an extremely safe and peaceful country. It also tops #1 in terms of the country that offers a very high standard of living in general for domestic and international students. Like I said, great quality of life. And I think the other very, very important factor that makes Canada super enticing for students is that it's very, very affordable in terms of, not just in terms of the education, but also in terms of living. So yeah, okay. So in terms of top Canadian schools, if we had to sort of name a few, these would be the 4 that I would personally recommend to students across the board. So you've got the University of Toronto, you've got the University of British Columbia, the University of Waterloo. These 3, in fact, were for the longest time, if you had to think about the top 3 schools, it would be these. And McGill has very interestingly, I think in the last 3-4 years, made an appearance as well, and has now also dominated the world list of colleges as well. So it's very, very interesting. So let's start off with the University of Toronto. The University of Toronto is they have 3 campuses. One is in St. George, the other one in Mississauga, and the other one in Scarborough. So students actually have the opportunity of deciding which campus they would like to apply to, depending on the program. They have an acceptance rate of 43%, which is quite high for international students. Fantastic student life. You've got 1,000+ clubs and organizations all across 3 campuses. There is a lot happening. QS World Ranking, as you can see, is 34th all across, and this is the recent ranking that has been released. And in terms of tuition fee, you're looking at approximately about 63,000 to 64,000 Canadian dollars in total, roughly. These are some of the deadlines that one should definitely keep in mind when it comes to the University of Toronto. Ideally, you're roughly looking at about the second week of January. Having said that, applications are open at this point, and the earlier you apply, the earlier you hear back. So depending on how important it is for you to get into the University of Toronto, you can take a call on when it is that you'd like to apply. But I usually recommend students to put in their applications by essentially the first week of November, especially if this is a priority school for you. Moving on, you've got the University of British Columbia. They've got 2 campuses. One is in Vancouver, which is in the city, and the other one in Okanagan, which is in the suburbs. UBC has a higher acceptance rate than that of Toronto. They're at a 52.4%. Again, lots to do for a student. There's a lot of focus on research, a lot of opportunities. Again, they have very good co-op programs as well. They're ranked 47th overall. And for the tuition fee, you're roughly looking at about 38,000 to about 40,000 Canadian dollars. These are some of the deadlines for UBC. Applications open up as early as October. In fact, they're open right now. For those who are looking at applying for scholarships, because UBC is very generous with their scholarships, and there are some that have priority deadlines, it's November 15th. So that's worth keeping in mind if you are looking to apply to the University of British Columbia. Next up is Waterloo. Waterloo, in fact, is very, very popular all across the world. Waterloo was the first institution across the world that introduced the concept of a co-op program, like I had mentioned earlier. So a co-op program is where one has the opportunity to also gain relevant work experience during their undergraduate program. And the University of Waterloo was the first to introduce this. And now co-op programs are being implemented across the world. So yeah, it's definitely something that students gravitate towards and have been gravitating towards for the University of Waterloo. So Waterloo, again, very similar to UBC, they have an acceptance rate of 53%. Again, a very, very dynamic student life. Their world ranking is slightly lower. They're 154th. But again, for computer science and for business programs in particular, they definitely do top the charts. And for tuition fee, there is a particular range. So you're looking at about 45,000 Canadian dollars up to, say, about 66,000 Canadian dollars. So it again depends on the program that you choose to apply for. And these are some of the deadlines for UBC. So primarily all of the programs, except for a few exceptions like pharmacy and optometry, you've got some others, but primarily it's the 1st of February. But again, like I said before, if this is a priority school for you, I would urge you to consider putting in your application as early as the 1st week of November, and perhaps latest, say, by the end of November, beginning December. Okay, and then finally, McGill. Like I said, McGill has recently topped the charts. And like I said, it's 31st in terms of the world ranking. McGill is in Quebec, and they have an acceptance rate of 46%, very, very research oriented. It's a public university. There is a lot that one can do. And there are a lot of students who are gravitating towards McGill, especially in the recent couple of years. In terms of tuition fee, McGill is a lot lesser than the other 3 that we had spoken about earlier. So you're looking at about 25,000 Canadian dollars in total. These are some of the deadlines for McGill. Primarily for your application should go in by the 15th of January. There are some scholarships for which I think the deadline is the 21st of Jan. And there are some other programs with separate deadlines. So yeah. Okay, now on to the more important part of this session, which is primarily to understand what are the various requirements that Canadian schools have, and across the board, whichever school it is that you do decide to apply to, the process is pretty much the same. So in terms of application forms, you're primarily looking at two. So you've got the OUAC, which is the Ontario University's Application Center. So this is a common application form that you fill out for all colleges in the Ontario region. So if you're applying to, say, for example, schools like the University of Toronto, you're applying to the University of Waterloo, you will be doing it via the OUAC. The other common application that you have is called the Education Planner BC, which is for colleges and universities located in British Columbia. So essentially, if you're looking to apply to UBC, you will be doing it via the Education Planner BC, or even Simon Fraser, for example. So what essentially happens is that you are initially filling out either of these forms, which includes some very basic details. And you will also be listing out all of the colleges that you'd want to apply to, along with the program of your choice. And then you send that application across. Once you've submitted these respective applications, the next step would involve all of the colleges individually reaching out to you. And that's when you create your portals, your student portals, and then you go about, sometimes some colleges have essays, some colleges require you to list out your extracurricular activities. For certain programs, like for business management, there might even be an interview that you would have to do, but all of this happens after these primary forms are sent in. Also, what one should note is that for some colleges like McGill and the University of Alberta, they have their own separate applications. So for those of you who are looking to apply to these colleges, go onto the website and then you could be redirected to their online applications. Okay, now in terms of academic requirements, and this is something that I cannot stress on enough. If you are absolutely sure of the program that you would like to apply to, please go on to the website of the respective college and go through all of the prerequisite information that is being shared. Canadian college websites are very, very detailed. They make sure that they list out all of the requirements that they have and what they expect and what they're looking for in terms of their applicants. So if it is business that you want to study at Waterloo, go onto the website, look up what the various requirements are. Primarily for Indian students, they expect your final 12th grade results, of course. And apart from that, while you're applying, you're going to be sending them your 10th grade final results alongside your 12th grade predicted scores. Some colleges may also ask you for your 11th grade final scores. Again, like I said, students applying for courses that require calculus must have studied math in their 12th grade. And examples of such programs are engineering, business, science, etc. GPA above 3.0 is considered a good score to get admission to the top Canadian universities. This is what is said in most universities on their websites, but I would urge you to aim higher, because of course, for the top schools, they're looking at a very competitive GPA and you're expected to have it. Okay, testing is a very important criteria when it comes to applying to Canada, primarily also from the point of view of the student permit. So when you're an international student and you go and study in Canada, you apply for a student permit. And one of the requirements for that permit is that you are able to demonstrate your English proficiency. So earlier it used to be either the Toefl or the Ielts, but now you've got some other options that are also included. Again, go on to the university websites and check out the individual requirements that they have and prepare accordingly. This is very important. So for TOEFL, you're looking at an overall score between 80 and 100. For the Ielts, it's an overall band score that should be a minimum of 6.5. I usually tell my students to at least try and aim for an 8 across all 4 bands. You have the Canadian Academic English Language Assessment that could also be taken, where you're expected to get a 70. You've got the Pearson Test of English, where you need to be able to achieve a 63 overall. There's also the Cambridge English Test that can be taken, where 180 is the overall score that one is expected to have. And a very recent addition is the Duolingo English Test, where you're expected a 120 overall. Letter of recommendation. Now, for those of you who are acquainted with the admissions in the UK and US, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that the letter of recommendation is a very important document in the admission process. But with Canadian colleges and universities, for the longest time, this was never really something that they would ask for. But now, by and large, there are some colleges that have included this in the entire admissions process. So, for example, University of British Columbia will ask you to include 2 references in the application. And these references could be your teachers, your guidance counselor at school, coaches, instructors, or mentors that you've perhaps done a project under. This could be a community service engagement. It could be an internship. Essentially, people who have worked closely with you and can attest to your capabilities and your potential as an individual. Of course, please note that none of these references should come from a family member, a friend, or a paid agent. That is extremely frowned upon. Essays. Now, I think what's really interesting is that for the longest time, Canada was very, very traditional in terms of their admissions in general. They were very academic in nature, so it was mostly revolving around a student's grades. But now there is a gradual shift that we're seeing where they're trying to look at a more holistic admissions approach. So essays are being introduced, and UBC has something called personal insight questions, where you've got about 4 to 5 questions for 200 words each, where you've got to basically talk about, your academic goals, what are some of your extracurricular interests, and it's a great way to showcase your aptitude, your abilities, your skills, and your personality. It is also a great opportunity for you to include any contextual data if you feel that there were some extenuating circumstances that, for instance, if there was a dip in your grades and there was a very genuine reason for it, you can use your essays to essentially talk about it. Okay, so scholarships for international students at the top Canadian schools. So again, like I'd mentioned earlier, Canada is very, very enticing for international students because of the amount of aid that they offer. Now, please note that there are 2 different kinds of aid when it comes to Canadian universities. So they give you scholarships on the basis of merit and also in terms of financial requirement. Colleges like University of Toronto, UBC, Waterloo, McGill are very, very generous with their scholarships. There are so many opportunities that are available for students. For colleges like UBC, Waterloo, and University of Toronto, when you send in your application, you are automatically being considered for scholarships, which is fantastic. But over and above that, they also have dedicated scholarships that you have to essentially be nominated for from your school. And there's also an application process, but there is a lot that one has access to. Again, this is something that I tell all my students, please go onto the website. There is a plethora of information available. There are very clear guidelines as to how one goes about the entire process. What are the various steps involved? If you need any assistance, please seek that information. We're more than happy to help you out in any way that we can. Speak to your counselor at school, speak to your teachers. If scholarship is something that is a very, very important criteria for you, please make sure that you're well acquainted with all of the information that you need. Okay, so that's about it from my side. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, anything that I could help you out with. I'd let you guys type it out. Take a couple of seconds. Okay, so there's a question. Can we join university without having had math for business management? So if you're looking at a top school, say like the University of Toronto, UBC, Waterloo, unfortunately, math is definitely a prerequisite because it is very integral for them that you possess some form of knowledge. So they definitely expect you to have math in the 11th and the 12th grade. If you're very, very keen on doing business and you do not have math, I would urge you to, if you don't have math at school, I would urge you to try and see if there are any alternative ways for you to take it up. Perhaps you could take up some advanced placements. Or you could take up some additional tests on the side, but you will definitely have to demonstrate academic rigor when it comes to mathematics. So yeah. Okay, application deadlines. So applications for Canadian schools are open. You can go ahead and create your accounts on OUAC. You can go and create your accounts for on the Education Planner BC, and applications are primarily going to be open as late as February. I think the University of Waterloo has a deadline for the first week of February, but UBC, Toronto, McGill would ideally be around, say, the January 15th timeline. So okay, when are the English proficiency exams to be given, before filling the application or after admission? So when it comes to the tests like the Toefl or the Ielts, what you need to take into consideration is the fact that they're valid for 2 years. So what I usually recommend my students is to take it up during their summer break while they're in the 12th grade. So that's prior to sending out the application, because a lot of times what happens is that colleges do ask for these scores. So it's always better to be prepared. Having said that, if for some reason you may not have been able to take the test, you can always take it afterwards. So even after putting in your application, you could send in an email to the respective university and let them know that you will be taking it at some point and you will send your scores across. Okay, which university has the best scholarship and co-op opportunities? So in terms of co-op, all of the colleges that we sort of spoke about earlier have co-ops, but like I said earlier, Waterloo is where it all started. So somehow, I mean, I've had the best feedback coming from Waterloo, and if you'd like to know more, there is on our CollegePass app and the website, we have this fantastic interview where we're speaking to a current student at Waterloo who's part of the computer science co-op program. And he really goes into details about, all of the things that he's been exposed to, how the entire experience has been. And I think more importantly, the application process, because with co-op programs, what happens is that they have a limited amount of seats. So, I mean, automatically there is a lot of competition. And as far as scholarships are concerned, all of the colleges that I mentioned are very, very generous in terms of their scholarships. You've got scholarships at University of Toronto and UBC that offer a full ride. So essentially your entire tuition fee is being taken care of. So you need to identify which is the right college for you. And once you do that, make sure you're doing a detailed research into the various scholarships that are offered by the university. Okay, so if we choose marketing as a specialization, would it be possible to do it without mathematics? So yeah, marketing definitely is an area where you could get away without mathematics. But again, I would urge you to look very closely at the program requirements, because at some point they will need some form of mathematics. So maybe they would want to see your 10th grade final scores in math. And that is something that, you could showcase. Okay, very interesting question. I get this from students all the time. Do SAT scores matter to Canadian universities? Now, the SAT or the ACT is not a mandatory requirement for Canadian universities. Having said that, if you have taken the SAT and if you have a good score, don't hesitate to send it across to the university. It always adds an extra layer to your overall profile. But if you don't have an SAT score, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the admissions process when you're applying to colleges in Canada. Does having a startup help improve application for undergrad business? Yes, absolutely. I think business is a very, very popular undergrad program in Canada. And I was speaking to someone who taught at Waterloo, and she was a professor who taught one of their business management courses, and she was just telling me that how there are certain skills that they look for when it comes to a business student. And one of them is definitely being able to demonstrate that passion for business. How are you really showcasing the fact that you're passionate about business? And what students are doing across the board is that they're coming across with very interesting projects and, startup ideas. And it's always great. It's always an added advantage to be able to have these initiatives as part of your overall profile, because, it also shows that dedication and that sincerity that you have towards this particular area of interest. Okay, is Ielts 7.5 good enough for business management? Yeah, I mean, across the board, like I said, if you have an overall score of a 7, that should be good enough. Of course, you should try and aim for an 8. That's always what I tell my students, because it's always good to be on the safer side. Can SAT math help in covering the math requirement? Okay, so I'm assuming this is for a business or an engineering program. It could to a certain degree, but they will definitely be looking at your 10th grade math scores. And while you can try and write to the university and make a case for yourself, it might be slightly tricky, because colleges are very, very particular, and they constantly talk about the fact that students don't go through the entry requirements enough, which is why you end up making these errors. But math is definitely a very important prerequisite for business programs, for computer science, for engineering, etc., etc. Okay, I have a startup and 90% plus good scores and internship experiences. The only thing is that I've not had math since 9th grade. That's the only problem. I'm assuming you're looking for a program in business. So like I said, since this is a prerequisite, you are going to have to be able to showcase some form of connection with mathematics. So there are a lot of additional ways that you could do that. You could take up an advanced placement examination and get a score of 5 on 5. You could also take up various mathematics competitions. Waterloo has some very exciting competitions that happen across the board, and they have a lot of standing, so perhaps you could participate in those. There are also a lot of other external mathematics courses that are available. So perhaps you could undertake some of those, but you will have to showcase mathematics on your profile. That is definitely a prerequisite. Okay, great. I hope I've been able to answer all of your questions. Okay, I have another question. I'm going to take this. Okay, does an IB student need to take the Ielts or the Toefl? So from an admission standpoint, because you're doing the IBDP, which is considered to be a great curriculum, you may not necessarily have to take the Ielts or the Toefl. You can always ask for a waiver in terms of demonstrating your English proficiency. But what happens is that eventually when you're going to be applying for your study permit, you will have to send in your scores. So if Canada is a priority for you, it is always, always, always a good option to take the Ielts, the Toefl, or any other English proficiency test. Which is the best university amongst Waterloo, UBC, and University of Toronto? This is actually a question that you should answer. And I say this to all of my students. The entire concept of being able to identify a personal fit, the rank and the reputation of a college are very, very important criteria to consider, but there's so much more than that. I think this is a very personal choice that every student should be outrightly making. Think about all of the factors that are important for you. What are your expectations from a college life? These are 4 very important years of your life, and it's very critical that you make the right choice and the right decision. So I think what you need to do is, especially in terms of, being able to pick between Waterloo, UBC, and University of Toronto, research into all these 3 colleges, make a list of pros and cons, think about the priorities that you have, think about all your interests, whether they're academic or extracurricular. Are you going to be able to further these interests at the campus that you choose? Is scholarship a criteria for you? Is the location important for you? Is weather a factor for that matter? Are you looking for a very exciting student life on campus? These are some questions that you need to answer. And I think when you actually are able to have these answers and you do your research, you're going to be able to identify the best college for you. Are 11th and 12th scores more important to universities than the 10th? Okay, so for Canadian schools, they're definitely going to be looking at your 10th grade final scores. Some colleges may or may not ask you for your 11th grade final scores, but 12th grade, they will definitely be looking at your predicted scores and of course your final grades. Okay, interesting question. How many universities should we apply for? So ideally, what I recommend to my students is that you shouldn't be looking at more than, say, 8 to 10 colleges. And an interesting way to go about this entire process would be to try and create a well-balanced college list for yourself, where you basically categorize colleges. So, you've got reach colleges that are basically your dream colleges. You've got target colleges. You've got safety schools. So with that categorization, try and come up with 8 to 10 colleges. We've got some very interesting sessions on the app, on our website, which is dedicated to the entire process of being able to curate a college shortlist and what are the various factors one should take into consideration. So do check it out. There's a lot of useful information and it'll definitely be able to help you identify how to go about the entire process. Which one is the best for computer science among these 4? In my personal opinion, the University of Waterloo has the best computer science program across the board in Canada for sure. And again, since it's one of the best, it's also very competitive, very high standards in terms of admissions, but very excellent program. Again, like I'd said earlier, we have, this entire interview where we're talking to, a computer science student from Waterloo who's also doing the co-op program. And he basically takes you through his entire profile. What are some of the things that he did when he applied? What were his grades like? And how the entire experience for him at Waterloo has been. So do check it out. There's a lot of useful information being shared. And having said that, I mean, Toronto, UBC, McGill also have equally good programs. So I would urge you to go onto their websites, check out the course modules that would be taught, go through, all of the other details, the faculty, what are some of the opportunities that students have in terms of internships, in terms of placements, et cetera, and, make a call accordingly. Okay, should we apply by ourselves or through a counselor? Interesting question. Again, this is something that you should be answering for yourself. Applying to colleges can be tricky. It can be extremely daunting for students, especially because there's so much on your plate at the moment. If you're applying right now, I'm assuming you're in the 12th grade and you've got your studies, you must have your extracurriculars. So it's sort of difficult to navigate this entire space, which is where, a counselor comes in, because we're here to guide you and we're here to support you in this entire journey. So, and, help you make the right choices and the right decisions. So yeah, I mean, if you are looking for assistance through your application process, please write to us at support@collegepass.org, where I'm happy to meet with you. We can have a session. We can talk about, your entire profile, what some of your, what are your dream colleges and how we can go about the entire process. We can definitely curate that for you. I'm just going to take the last couple of questions. Okay, what is a good percentage for the 10th and the 12th? Again, if you're looking at applying to some of the top colleges in Canada, for the 10th, you should ideally be looking at a 90% and above. And for the 12th, again, you definitely should aim for a 92, 93. It's always good to be, on the higher side in terms of your grades. And because that is one of the main, criteria for admissions in Canada. Your grades are of utmost importance. And what happens is that when you have the academic grades, that also gives you more opportunity for merit scholarships. Like, for example, the University of Waterloo is very clear. Like, if you go onto their website, they'll tell you how when you have, a 90% and above, you're automatically considered for a scholarship. So grades are so very important. Okay, I'm going to take the last question. Does community service improve an application form? Community service is definitely looked at very greatly in terms of, the admissions process, because it says a lot about the student. Having said that, at the end of the day, there is no checklist where, you have to do certain things. Colleges expect you to be involved in the things that you're passionate about, and they expect you to be able to showcase that when you're, applying through the admissions process. So if you are passionate about community service, if there is a cause that, resonates with you greatly, go for it, but don't involve yourself in it purely from the point of view of admissions, because colleges can tell. It's very easy, even for us as advisors and counselors, it's very easy to sort of differentiate between students who are actually actively involved in a cause versus, just being able to do it because they think it's the right thing to do. So great. Thank you so much, guys. This was, I thoroughly enjoyed answering your questions. And like I said, if, you want to have some more questions answered, please write to us at support@collegepass.org, and we'd be happy to get back to you. We're happy to send you a link for a consultation session as well, if you need any assistance throughout your application process. So yeah, thank you so much, and take care of yourselves.